Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or if you're watching this on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Brandon P. Joining me today is our very own publisher, Mr. Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here today to talk about Selection Sunday. Today, we just finished Selection Sunday. North Carolina was not chosen to go to the tournament. Not an unexpected result, but they actually got a lot closer than a lot of people thought. They were only the third team. They were only three teams away from making the tournament, but that's obviously a far where that's far away from where we expect them to be at this point of the season, right? So the first thing I want to talk to you about is Carolina. Just what are your thoughts on the Tar Heels not making the tournament?
No, we weren't surprised. I am surprised they were the third team out, to be honest with you. I guess I believe that going into Greensboro, they had to win the whole thing. So maybe if they would have beaten Virginia Thursday night, maybe they would have gotten in, or they would have moved a little bit closer. They still would have only had one quad one win because it would have removed the other quad one when they had over UVA at home. That's because UVA was in the top 30, so they would have dropped out of the top 30, but it would have picked up a quad one win because they'd be in the top 50, and that's what you need for a neutral site win. In other words, the NET system, the quad system, is an undeniable joke. And then, trust me, North Carolina had no business in the NCAA tournament. Tar Heels had many opportunities to get the job done. They didn't do it. So this isn't about that. It's just about how silly the whole process is. It needs revamping. They need different people making the decisions. We'll go off on that here in a second, or I'll go off on that here in a second because I have some pretty strong words about it. But the Tar Heels knew in that locker room Thursday night they weren't going to get in. I had three players tell me after they lost to Duke last week, we got to win four, got to cut down the nets. So when they lost to UVA, and of course got closed out strong again down the end, which happened so often to this team this year, which was one of many of the massive boxes that they never could check fully to figure out to turn the needle of the nose in the right direction. They knew they didn't earn it. Armando said we just weren't really good. We just really weren't any good, that good. Didn't get it done. Hubert said we had chances to get wins, didn't. So it's on them. I mean, they know that they had opportunities. You lose at home by Pitt by one. The Iowa State game, they're up late and they blow that. The Alabama game, they're up a couple times, regulation, overtime. They don't get that done. If they win that game, they're absolutely in the field. And maybe have a different disposition during the course of the year. Who knows? Disposition, I think, was one of the hallmarks of this team. It kind of ebbed and flowed a lot. And a lot of it had to do with performance. Sometimes it didn't initiate performance. It was the result of performance, which is a bad sign.
Yeah.
So they didn't belong in the field. The fact that they were the third one in is kind of curious. I marvel at the logic, if you will, that every year, whoever the committee head is, they go out there and they answer these questions about why a team didn't get in, and they give ridiculous responses. And the case in point for this is Oklahoma State, which was the first team out. And the committee chair was asked, why weren't they in? He said, well, they had 18 quad one games and they only won 6. Like, okay, they had 18 quad one games. Even as silly as the quad is, that means they played one hell of a schedule. And they had 6 quad one wins, which is winning 1 out of 3 against quad one teams, which is actually pretty solid. NC State was 1-6. Houston's a 1 seed. They have 3 quad one wins. They have a home quad 3 loss to Temple, who's 127 in the NET. So it's very unfortunate that the same logic is not applied to every team. I think Duke got a little screwed. I think Duke should be a 4 and should be in Greensboro. I think Penn State got screwed. They're a 10, and they've got to play Texas A&M, who was vastly underseeded too. There's a lot of really weird stuff that they do. I know they have to fit things given that they try to avoid conference matchups until a regional final. Sometimes it's unavoidable when there's so many teams from a league in there. So they have to move teams around. Sometimes it bumps them up a seed or down a seed. But, as far as North Carolina goes, Brandon, Tar Heels didn't deserve it. There's no beef. My understanding the other night was they weren't even going to have a watch party. So they knew. The other question would be about the NIT, which we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes. But there are a lot of opportunities during the course of the season you can look to and say, man, boy, they really screwed up there. They really screwed up there. But in the end, we kind of know who they were. They were who they were. They were a 20-13 basketball team that, quite frankly, was okay. They had 3 wins over teams in the field because Clemson didn't make it. And those wins were Virginia, which is 27, I think, in the NET, 26, 27, NC State, which barely got in, and College of Charleston, which got in by winning the CAA. And even with only 3 losses, had they not won the CAA title, they'd be in the NIT.
Yeah.
And Carolina would have just 2 wins over teams in the field. They had 7 wins over teams in the top 100 of the NET. There is nobody who understands basketball, who understands the tournament process, and even someone who thinks the NET is a wonderful thing. None of those people would make an argument that Carolina belongs in the field. They don't. They're not in. And as a result, this is one of the most underachieving seasons in college basketball history. And it's not, there's some people saying, boy, you guys in the media, you're the ones who made him out to be this because you voted him number 1. Well, let's remember that in July last year, they were saying championship or bust. Yeah. They said it all along in the preseason. And I asked Hubert at the ACC tip-off in October, I went back and listened to that part of the interview, and I ran it into piece the other day. Are you okay with them saying that? Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm not saying it, but I'm okay with them saying it. And then he went on to say, my goal is for us to reach our potential. I'm paraphrasing right now. And I think if we reach our potential, we could be the last team standing on Monday night. So they set it up too. They created an environment for these expectations with the mock SI cover and everything else. So a lot of people screwed the pooch on this one. We in the media screwed up. I thought this team was a lot better than it was. I thought a couple of times it was maybe turning the corner. It wasn't. So I was wrong, and they were wrong too. So there's a lot of, when you have the most underachieving season in college basketball history, or one of them, there's a lot of screwing up that goes on all the way across the board. So I guess we're all kind of guilty of that, but it was a bad season. So, and they decided to end it tonight too.
Well, what I will say is when I first got hired with Tar Heel Illustrated, one of the first things you told me is we judge teams. The teams tell us what their expectations are for the season, and we judge them based on what they tell us. And I was at ACC Media Day, and there was a lot of championship or bust talk. So it's not, how can you blame?
I judge them, to clarify. I judge teams in my career based on what they say their goals and expectations are, provided that they make sense. Now, if I'm covering Duke football and they say we're going to win the CFP in a typical year, I don't think I'm going to judge them on that because there is no history behind that, right? But if I'm going to cover Duke basketball and they say we're going to win the national title and they've got a lot of good players back, or if you're North Carolina, you have 14 to 17 guys back from a team that led by 15 points at halftime in the national championship game, I'm going to judge you by that. You're judging yourself by that. I'm going to judge you by that. And that's probably why there is a lot of harshness from the media about this team, but none of it is harsher than the thoughts that the kids have themselves.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
None of it is more difficult than sitting in that room and facing each other Thursday night when they realize that they never flipped the switch. And Brandon, they never flipped the switch because what would the switch be? The switch would be a new gear. Flipping the switch and on comes the new gear. There was no next gear. They didn't have that next gear, therefore they didn't have the switch. I think they kept expecting to flip a switch and hit the next gear. And I think they were stunned that finally it was over. They never got that gear. I remember asking RJ 3 times during the season about, are you surprised, different periods of the year, are you surprised you guys haven't gotten to that next gear? The first 2 times he said yes. The last time he said no. And that pretty much means that maybe the reality that there wasn't that gear. Armando said it, which really weren't very good. So I think that he said acceptance when I asked him in the locker room after UVA the other night, because Leakey had said, I asked Leakey what it was like taking off that uniform for the last time, knowing full well they weren't going to take an NIT bid, right? And he said numbness. And I said, well, is it because of the abrupt ending or the way the whole season played out? And he said both. So I asked Armando, Lee, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, Leaky said that, that there's a numbness now, and it's not just because of the abrupt ending, but the way it all played out. But I added with Armando, but is there also frustration and maybe even some acceptance? In other words, this is who you are, and you guys are coming to terms with that. And he didn't say frustration. He said a little numbness, but he said, yeah, acceptance. They knew. And I think it was the inevitable, and it ended. And that's one of the reasons why they made the decision tonight to end their season and not continue on in the NIT.
I wanted to talk to you about the post game locker room after Virginia. I didn't, obviously for some personal reasons, I didn't get to make it up to Greensboro for the tournament. But I was reading from a lot of you yourself included, but a lot of other media pundits saying that the team just seemed dejected after the game. Like this team is done. Like they. So do you think that went into the decision of declining the NIT bid?
I asked 4 players if they would play in the NIT, and none of them said yes. They didn't say no. Armando said, I really don't want to.
I'll do
Pete
it.
Nance said, I don't want to talk about that right now. Leakey said, no comment. Hubert, CL Brown in the press conference. I didn't go to either post-game press conference because when the locker room opens, as soon as Hubert's available, our head coach is available, I go right to the locker room because that's where all the stuff is for me. So CL Brown asked Hubert in post-game, if you had to make a pitch to the NCAA to make a case for inclusion, what would it be? And Hubert really didn't have an answer. Well, he played a tough schedule. ACC's an elite league, and then that's when he ended up saying we just didn't win games. We had opportunities, just didn't win games. I'm paraphrasing again, but you knew it was done. I walked out of there, and a couple of guys, I said, look, their season's over. And I told you guys, full disclosure here, before the ACC tournament, said they're going to lose Thursday and the season would end because they didn't have any juice left. I thought that they would run out of gas after Duke. I thought the tank was empty after that. They might have one flare-up in Greensboro, and that would be it. And they had to flare up against BC, which was a willing accomplice that night because the Eagles did not play well, and it didn't help them that Quentin Post wasn't healthy. But Carolina was going to rock them no matter what. But they used up all their bullets. They had nothing left for UVA. I thought they played hard. They were a flawed team for multiple reasons. Everything was on the table there Thursday night. And then afterward, they were done. And, that's human nature. We talk human nature an awful lot. We have all been in situations in our lives with something that we have invested so much into. And at some point you just say, I'm done. You back off, you got to walk away. There's nothing left. There's no point in prolonging it. Let's regroup and get back at it in a different way, learn from our mistakes, and try to be better at whatever it is next time. And that's exactly what this team has done, what this program has done.
Yeah. Actually, AJ, I'm sorry. I actually want to backtrack on this conversation. I want to go back to the NET because I have a thought about the NET. I think my issue with the NET or the net or however you want to pronounce it, my issue with it is it puts too much emphasis on games played outside of early in the season. So yeah. I think before the camera started rolling, we were talking about Clemson and how at the beginning of the season they didn't have PJ Hall. So I think my issue with the NET is the fact that they put so much emphasis on games that are played at the beginning, and then in conference play, they're like, well, no team in this conference is good, but it's not taking into account that teams get better over the course of a season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it doesn't gauge improvement.
Yeah.
Which, I thought Carolina was a better team in January and February than they were in November when they almost beat Alabama. Yeah. If they would have beaten Alabama then, but maybe struggled a lot in January and February, and they did struggle quite a bit in February at times, but I did think that their high moments were much better than the high moments earlier in the year. So there were parts of this team that did improve. That would have been given more credence than beating UVA twice in the last month or whatever it would be, like if they would have done that. And I think that that's a problem because with the NET, the quad system, and the NCAA weighing so heavily in their decisions, the narrative of every conference is set by Christmas. And one of the ways that the ACC hurts itself also is they play too many conference games. When they went to 20 conference games, I'll never forget sitting in the press room 15 feet away from Roy, and Roy's shaking his head like, it's ain't good. Because that means you're building in more losses. You're better off beating Akron twice and playing an 18-game conference schedule than splitting with Florida State and Pitt. Yeah. You're better off doing that. And the league removed that. So because you're playing 20 conference games, the league hasn't scheduled as tough outside the conference. So if you have a couple of opportunities and you blow them, there's no way to recover by having more games. So I think the ACC should go back to an 18-game conference schedule, stop playing conference games in the beginning of December, the weekend of the ACC football championship. That's stupid, because what happens is that gets built into your stupid NET as well. So if you lose a conference, like if you're Carolina and you're coming off of Virginia, you're coming off of Indiana, you go out to Portland, you have a tough trip there. Then you got to go play at Indiana in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And then you got to open up conference play a few days later at Virginia Tech in a raucous arena when you don't have Armando. That's ridiculous. You know, I'm not making excuses at all, because Carolina should win games like that. That's what North Carolina should do. But they were put in a situation where the schedule was made even more difficult. And you're also building in 10 guaranteed absolute road games against Power 5 teams that know you pretty well. And if you're one of the better teams in the league, you're going to draw on the road. If you're North Carolina, you're Duke, typically Louisville, except this year, typically Syracuse, except this year, you're going to draw well on the road. There's going to be a lot of venom in those buildings. So it's a more difficult game for Duke or North Carolina to play at Notre Dame than it is if Oklahoma State went to Notre Dame, because of the venom aspect there. So I just think the ACC needs to go back to 18 conference games, get rid of those early season conference games, allow everybody 2 more non-conference games, and do whatever you want with them. If you choose to play, South Dakota A&M Tech Ministry School twice and get a couple of wins over teams that are 350 in the NET, that's on you. If you choose to go to Kansas and UCLA on the road and you lose and you barely get in because you don't have enough wins, that's on you. Be creative with your scheduling. Do it in a manner that can make you better, but also help you on Selection Sunday, which is an area Hubert needs to grow. He needs to understand what Quad 1 is. Mike Krzyzewski, for all the criticism, and I criticized, especially when I was covering them, when are you going to go on the road outside the league, dude? Like, their only true road games were places like Georgetown at the MCI Center in DC or St. John's at Madison Square, when they really weren't true road games. But he figured out a way. Holy Cross is going to be great next year. Let's bring them in. Albany's going to be really good in their league. They're going to win a ton of games. It's going to help the RPI. Let's bring them in. And he figured out a way to, he always had great teams, but to really build a schedule around what should be games that will help them in their RPI. So they get a higher seed. When it comes to the tournament, if there's games in Greensboro or Raleigh or Charlotte, they get to play there and all that kind of stuff. So Hubert he has publicly said that he doesn't understand these things. Now maybe he needs to, and he should schedule accordingly moving forward. And the ACC needs to ditch the 20-game schedule thing. Just ditch it. It doesn't help the league at all.
That's actually
so. Yes, the NET is stupid. The quad system's stupid. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that if you beat UVA, if they're a 30, that's a great win. That gets you in the tournament. If they're a 31, doesn't mean anything. Carries no more value than anything else, because they're clearly fixated on quad 1 wins and nothing else.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into what I want to talk about next. So it's official. North Carolina's not going to the tournament. Disappointing season, you said earlier, probably the most disappointing season in college basketball history. In your opinion, I hate to put you on the spot like this because we didn't discuss this before, but in your opinion, what's next for UNC? How do they fix this? How do they right the ship? That might be too vague of a question.
No, but we can. I think it began with declining the NIT bid, and I know we wanted to talk about that because I've already got a little bit of the vibe on our message boards at TarHillIllustrated.com on our premium boards, which is what I'm partaking in, where a lot of people say, "Oh, they quit. This is a bad look," and all that kind of stuff. And I get people saying that. I get fans being upset that they're just kind of walking away from the season, so to speak. But let's remember, the NIT is not part of the season technically. It's not part of your schedule. It's an invitation. It's called the National Invitation Tournament. An invitation doesn't means it's not mandatory. So they RSVP'd, no thank you. We got other things going on, basically. So I think because of the circumstances of that room I saw the other day, and quite frankly, after the Duke game, and some guys are banged up, Armando needs to get healthy. Guys have to make decisions. The sooner they make those decisions, the better for the program moving forward, because they're going to gain nothing out of playing in the NIT. And people are saying, well, it'll be more playing time for Tyler Nickel and Jalen Washington. They're going to play 3 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes against Marist isn't going to help them at this point. What's going to help them is to give guys time and space to make the decisions they need to make, which will then allow Hubert more time to sit back and just watch the tournament, watch the nation out there, check out some guys that we've heard about, some names that are looking at going into the portal, and there might be some not relationships with North Carolina, no tampering, anything like that. But what I'm saying is there are guys that target certain schools, and there are guys that fit at certain places. And there's 5 or 6 names that David put in a piece a few weeks ago that might be candidates to play at North Carolina. So some of them are playing in the tournament. So watch those guys. Take a look at what you need. It will give him more time to comb over what's in the portal in accordance to what he's going to need for next year's roster. And that's all that matters. This team grossly underachieved. They'll be the first ones to admit it. Why prolong things in the NIT? And seriously, if you're a Carolina fan, if they're playing in the NIT championship the Wednesday night before the Final Four, how excited are you going to be? Do you want that constant reminder that look at them now and they didn't? It's a constant reminder of what they didn't do this year, in my opinion. And in almost all cases, I would say, yes, that team needs to play. Like, I think Clemson needs to play. We were talking about Vanderbilt before we started recording. Vanderbilt absolutely needs to play. These are great situations for them. These are opportunities for a Vanderbilt program that's growing under Jerry Stackhouse to continue that process, to continue to play games. I don't think in North Carolina's case that would be it. If they were young, like in 2010, when they used the NIT to get better for the next season. Remember, that's when Roy said, John Henson, you're going to play 4. This whole 3-man experiment, not working. You're going to play 4. And John was fantastic down the stretch, and they got to the NIT finals. I think the team the following year benefited from that run. There's no doubt about it. I don't see any way next year's team would benefit from this team playing in the NIT. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but there are very few occasions in which I would ever back a team for not playing. But this is one of the times where I would do that, so I have no problem with it.
Well, AJ, I think that's
What about you? Well, you got to give your take on it. You got to give your take. It's not just me here. You got to give your take on it, Brandon.
On North Carolina not making the tournament?
No, your take on on turning down the NIT.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you said all the good stuff. I agree with you. You can't go from expect number 1 preseason to the NIT. And I don't know if you said this in the podcast or if we said this before. I think it would be like more embarrassing for them to actually win the NIT. Could you imagine an NIT banner hanging up in the Dean Dome?
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah,
it would be like a little thread.
So what's up? Yeah, like what's
it'd be like what? It'd be like one of our press passes or something. We just dangling up there in the corner, no one would ever be able to see it.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people on social media saying, "Oh, just treat it like a bowl game in football. Start the young guys."
Totally
and
different.
There's not enough people on the roster.
Yeah, because you get 50. It's like an extra spring practice in a bowl game.
Yeah.
If they got 2 weeks to just practice and work on stuff and adjust some things and then play, I'd say, okay, maybe so.
Yeah.
But they don't. NIT games are going to start Tuesday and Wednesday this week.
Yeah, they're going to do nothing.
They just jump right into it. So that's if it was like a bowl game, and I would say take advantage of the time together. And if a couple of guys want to opt out like they do in bowl games, if Armando decides he's not going to come back and he wants to opt out because he's banged up, fine. Go forward with what you got. If Caleb decides he's going to go pro or whatever he might do and doesn't want to be a part of it, that's fine. I think a lot of fans, if they had 2 weeks to get ready and they rolled out there with Nickel and Washington and Trimble getting a lot of minutes, I think a lot of fans might find that really interesting. But it's not a bowl game, and you can't turn around and get those kids ready to play in a game in 2 days if the others decide not to play. So I think they did the right thing. Again, let me make very clear. Rarely would I side with a team declining an NIT bid. But I think in this case, I'm okay with it. I think it makes sense. The best thing for the program is for everyone to move forward. That means Hubert hits the reevaluation phase of himself sooner. And I think that that's a lot more important than a couple of games in the NIT. I don't think those will benefit the program much. I think Hubert getting to the reevaluation period and some guys making decisions and them looking at the portal, that'll benefit the program much, much more.
Yeah, and if you're interested, in possible names that could be coming to the Carolina roster next year, you can go over to TarHillIllustrated.com to The message boards are swirling. You can get all the information you need there. Only $8.33 a month. But AJ, I think that's a good place to stop. North Carolina again did not make the NCAA tournament. Disappointing year, but for Tar Heel Illustrated, I've been Brandon P. He's been Andrew Jones. Thank you for watching.
Thanks.